This is the unconventional yet heartwarming story of an American man in his 40s who, after quitting his high-powered tech job to travel, finds himself exploring the remote wilderness of Siberia, Russia. There, he meets two Russian sisters in their 20s from an isolated tribe, leading to him getting them pregnant. Before you watch the video, please hit that subscribe button and give us a like. It's a huge help to us. Ethan Miller had worked as a software engineer at a major American tech company in Silicon Valley until he turned 40. It was a position with a promising, secure future, but at some point, the question, "Is this really the life I want?" began to haunt him. The tedium of his seemingly stable daily life became overwhelming, and he grew weary of his machine-like, repetitive existence. He hadn't married, having poured all his time into his job, but he felt a growing desire to find his own path before it was too late. After cashing out his stock options and savings, he began to travel the world, driven by a surging adventurous spirit. At first, he backpacked through Southeast Asia and Europe, but his thirst for something more remained unquenched. What Ethan truly craved was to experience more extreme environments, to set foot on sparsely populated, unknown lands, and truly live. This yearning eventually led his gaze to Siberia, renowned for its vast and harsh environment. While Siberia is immense, with its own cities and railway lines, Ethan's research indicated that isolated, primitive minority communities, almost entirely cut off from the outside world, were still scattered throughout the region. Accessing them was extremely difficult due to government controls and natural conditions. Yet, what captivated him was the adventurer's desire to visit lands virtually untouched by humans. So, he began studying some Russian and, referencing information and experiences from small-scale Siberian expeditions he found online, decided to set off. Of course, those around him tried to dissuade him, calling it reckless. What if you get isolated? What if you have an accident? They'd ask. But for Ethan, who had just passed his 40th birthday, fear held little sway. "It's my life, just this once. I want to live it fully," he thought. Ethan boarded a flight to Russia, transients through Moscow to Novosibirsk. He spent some time there, gathering information from local travelers, guides, and wilderness enthusiasts. He learned that while rare tribes existed in the Russian Far East or near the Arctic Circle, access was even more difficult, and permit procedures were complicated. He decided to head towards a remote area known to have been inhabited by minority groups for a long time. It was a place barely marked on maps, one that even locals would say, "People might live there, but transportation is terrible, and there's no information." So, he hired a local coordinator, prepared a 4-wheel drive vehicle capable of handling rough terrain, and meticulously packed food, cold weather gear, and equipment. Even if his Russian wasn't perfect, he believed he could manage with a translation app and memorized essential phrases. Above all, he had made the best preparations he could. All that remained was to act. "Can I really make it to this remote place?" he wondered. "It won't be easy, but after living like an ordinary person for 40 years, just this once, I wanted to enjoy an adventure." Even amidst danger, he drove hundreds of kilometers northeast from Novosibirsk. Initially, the roads were paved, but they gradually gave way to desolate, frozen landscapes. As winter approached, the temperature plummeted, and the road turned into an icy, gravel path. It was sparsely populated, with only occasional cargo trucks or village vehicles passing by. Driving all day wasn't enough to reach his destination, so he stayed overnight in a small town. At a restaurant, he used his broken Russian to order and asked, "I'm heading northeast. Is it okay?" The owner replied, "Almost no one lives out there. What's your business?" Ethan said he was a traveler, wanting to see the remote culture and scenery. The owner simply said, "Do as you please, be careful." And so, on the second and third days, he ventured deeper into the wilderness. Following a faintly marked path on the map, he relied on a paper map and his instincts when the GPS signal failed. He had packed enough fuel, food, and warm supplies, but unpredictable accidents or weather changes worried him. Still, having started, he couldn't stop. Eventually, around dusk, his vehicle skidded on a bumpy, snowy patch and got stuck. After struggling for hours, he barely managed to find the road again. When darkness fell and everything turned black, he saw a faint light in the distance. Hoping against hope, he drove towards it and, thankfully, a small hamlet of a few old wooden houses appeared. There seemed to be about 5 houses. The rest were obscured by darkness. Ethan stopped the car and called out in broken Russian, "Hello, is there any place I could stay?" A middle-aged woman opened a door, her expression asking, "Who are you? Where are you from?" Ethan, mixing a few Russian words with his translation app, explained he was a traveler from America hoping to rest comfortably for just one night. The woman, looking tense, called her neighbors, and soon several people gathered, staring at him. Ethan worried he couldn't expect kindness. But fortunately, the villagers didn't just chase the stranger away. The middle-aged woman said something that seemed to translate to, "We're a small village, we don't have an inn, but there's a spare room. It's cold, come on in." Ethan repeatedly thanked them and entered the house. A small stove radiated warmth. There was a Russian-style wood-burning stove, and though the walls were old, they blocked out some of the wind. Relieved, he offered the host family a little money and some American snacks like beef jerky and trail mix he had brought as thanks. That night, though his body was exhausted, he felt a sense of relief. "At least I can sleep under a roof tonight. Tomorrow, when it's light, I'll try to find my way again," he thought. A bubbling curiosity made Ethan want to explore the village the next day. Could there be a minority group or a special community living here? The next morning, Ethan stepped outside. The entire world seemed to be covered in snow and ice. About 5 wooden houses were clustered together, with patches of weeds and bushes visible here and there. People were moving backpacks or bundles of wood, or clearing the frozen path in front of their homes. Ethan greeted the middle-aged woman who had come out of her door again. This time, he turned on his translation app and asked, "Good morning, what is the name of this village?" The woman replied, "We just call it our village. It won't be on any map." As Ethan took a short walk around the village, an elderly man in his 60s asked if he was an outsider. And he explained he was an American tourist. The old man had a long beard and was heavily bundled in winter clothes. "This isn't a tourist spot. What brings you here?" he asked, his eyes curious. Ethan smiled and said, "I want to experience the nature and culture here. If people allow it, could I stay for a few days?" The old man shrugged. "I'll have to talk to the others. There are plenty of empty rooms here, so it should be fine," he replied. While circling the village, he noticed 2 young women standing near the edge of the settlement. They both looked like white Russians. One had blonde hair covered with a plastic sheet, and the other had brown hair tied back loosely. Both appeared to be in their early to mid-20s, and the contrasting hair colors were striking. Young people were rare in this village, so Ethan felt pleased and approached them. When they noticed him, they briefly made eye contact. Ethan greeted them in Russian. "Hello." The brown-haired woman smiled shyly and seemed to ask, "Hello, do you speak a little Russian?" When Ethan explained in his halting Russian that he was from America, the 2 women looked surprised but intrigued. The blonde woman smiled silently, while the brown-haired one asked in broken English, "Hello, tourist." Ethan managed a self-deprecating response like, "Yes, just a curious traveler." He hadn't expected to find any young people in this village, so seeing these 2 sisters, or so they seemed, was a surprise. "Who are you?" he asked. The brown-haired woman introduced herself as Natasha and her sister as Sonia. Natasha and Sonia, those sound Russian, Ethan thought. He introduced himself. "I'm Ethan Miller," Natasha repeated, "Ethan," with a smile, her pronunciation slightly accented. Sonia smiled watching them. He wondered if the middle-aged woman from the previous day was Natasha and Sonia's mother or a neighbor but didn't ask further. In such a small village, everyone likely knew each other. Natasha tried to converse by mixing in a few English words. "Where go? Here stay. Our village. Quiet," Ethan replied. "I just want to look around. The weather is cold, so I plan to rest for a few days and then leave." The 2 sisters, though shy, couldn't hide their curiosity. The older sister, Sonia, in halting Russian, expressed a welcoming sentiment. If you're staying, there's a spare room in the next house or an empty one you can use. If someone permits it. Ethan smiled and asked back, is it close to your house? Natasha hinted, maybe we could even stay together. Sonia nudged her, stopping her. He wasn't sure what they were discussing, but Ethan sensed, these two seemed to have a positive or intrigued feeling about me. Over the next few hours, Ethan surveyed the general lay of the land around the village. It was just a few huts, but the forest and hills behind them seemed like they might harbor wild animals like deer, rabbits, or wolves. The population was only a few dozen. Most were elderly, with a few middle-aged men, and some women and children. But there were hardly any young adults in their 20s or 30s. Natasha and Sonia were among the youngest. Later, Natasha found Ethan again and invited him. Want to eat with us at our house? She spoke in a mix of English and Russian, but he understood the invitation. Ethan readily agreed, considering the suspicious glances from the villagers. It seemed his interaction with the sisters was permitted. That evening, Ethan entered the sisters' home. It was a neater wooden house than he expected. A stove kept it warm, and a small table was set. The sisters served a simple potato stew, bread, and tea, and they carried on a light conversation. The older sister, Sonia, had her blonde hair tied back and was a woman of few words. But she kept glancing at Ethan. The younger sister, Natasha, was more inquisitive. What's America like? Are the cities big? Why did you come to such a remote place? Ethan replied, I just wanted an adventure. I wanted to see Siberia's nature and culture firsthand. And I thought, life is short. I should take a trip. Natasha and Sonia nodded. This is really deep in the mountains. We sometimes get isolated in winter. Most young people leave for the cities. So our village population has shrunk, they said, adding that with hardly any men left, marriage and starting families were difficult. When Ethan asked, so, do you have plans to marry or leave the village? The sisters paused. Sonia quietly said, our parents passed away a long time ago, and we feel we have to protect the village. We can't really go anywhere else. Natasha added, well, maybe someday we could go to the city. But right now, it's hard to get funds, and we have no way to make a living there. That night, the three shared a humble meal, but the conversation was fascinating. Their backgrounds were so different that clear communication was difficult, but a warmth was conveyed. Natasha's liveliness and Sonia's quiet consideration made Ethan feel comfortable. After the meal, when Ethan said, thank you, that was delicious, the sisters smiled shyly and said, it wasn't much, but we're glad you enjoyed it. Ethan suggested, I hope we can do something together tomorrow too. Take pictures or see the scenery. The sisters Yorokonde. Great. If the weather's good tomorrow, let's go towards the nearby forest. They agreed. Then, as Ethan was about to say, well, I'll head back to my lodging. Natasha, after a slight exchange of glances with Sonia, proposed, you don't really need to go back, do you? We have a spare room here. Ethan was taken aback. Is that okay? Won't I be a bother? But the sisters insisted it was fine. Sonia nodded in agreement. Use this room. It'll be more convenient for breakfast tomorrow too. Ethan found it strange, but with the sisters being so insistent, he felt bad refusing and accepted. The sisters prepared the room, and Ethan thanked them and went to bed. He didn't know what was happening, but he sensed this was a remarkably unconventional event in his life. For the next few days, Ethan spent time with the sisters, enjoying small adventures. They explored the nearby forest, valleys, their fields, and where they kept their livestock. The villagers, who had initially been wary, relaxed and watched him interact with the sisters. The middle-aged men said little but looked on with interest, while the elderly women whispered and smiled about the young man who had arrived. As Ethan tried to improve his Russian and converse, the sisters supplemented with English or gestures, making communication smoother. Naturally, they learned about each other's stories. They were full sisters, 2 years apart, who had lost their parents young and were raised by the grandmother, who had also passed away recently. They had a brother, but he had left for military service and then the city, and never returned to the village. The entire village was like this, with the male population dwindling, leaving mostly young women. Ethan sometimes wanted to ask about marriage or relationships but refrained when he sensed the sisters felt slightly uncomfortable. The sisters, knowingly or unknowingly, showed increasing closeness to Ethan, especially in the evenings, when the three sat around the small table for dinner and conversation. Natasha would often look at Ethan with a playful glint in her eyes. For example, she'd say, "I've never been to a city. What's a place like America like?" When Ethan described it as bustling and densely populated, the sisters would exclaim, "Wow, we can't even imagine." Spending time with them, despite the age difference, didn't feel awkward at all, and a sense of reliance on Ethan developed within the village. For instance, if Natasha struggled to chop wood, Ethan would do it for her, and he would take the lead when carrying feed for the livestock. At night, they'd often say, "You're so dependable. How wonderful it would be if a man like you stayed in our village." Ethan would smile and think to himself, "I just came as a traveler." One day, the sisters asked Ethan, "What if you stayed here longer? We feel secure when you're with us. The village is opening up to you too." Ethan hesitated. "I don't have any set plans, but I like it here, so I'm thinking of staying a bit longer. But can I stay here for life?" The sisters trailed off. "Well, we do have our customs." Ethan sensed there was something more but didn't press. He felt they would tell him soon enough. As time passed, Ethan began to perceive a startling reality. The majority of the residents were women, especially young women, while young men were almost non-existent. When he asked why, the answer was simple. Men left for military service or city jobs and usually didn't return. Those who remained were elderly men or those with disabilities. Naturally, marriage was difficult, and women often lived together to maintain their family lines. One night, the sisters quietly brought up the subject with Ethan. Sonia spoke first. "Our village lacks men, so with no children being born, our population is dwindling. So, when a man from the outside rarely comes, we try to have children with him." Natasha confessed, "It might sound outrageous, but from the moment you arrived, we thought of you as hope for saving this village." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. His premonition had come true. Sonia continued, "If you don't want to, we can't force you, but from our perspective, we're truly desperate. Would you be willing to have children with us?" Ethan's mind went blank. The thing he had half expected was actually happening, ethically and by common sense. It was absurd, but in this village, it seemed like a natural act. Natasha added, "If a child is born and the village continues, we will both love you. It would be wonderful if you stayed. But even if you leave, please don't resent us." An incredible question formed in Ethan's mind. "Both of you, you mean, both of you want to have my child at the same time?" he asked. The sisters nodded, blushing. "Here, it's not strange for one man to have children with multiple women. Men themselves are precious, and according to our village customs, if an outside man stays, he's welcomed, and if he leaves, we don't blame him, as long as he leaves a child. We continue our lineage through that child. Is this possible in the 21st century? Ethan couldn't sleep that night. On one hand, curiosity and passion welled up. On the other, a sense of responsibility and ethical concerns weighed on him. The sisters genuinely needed him. He wondered if the kindness and warmth they had shown him had this purpose all along, which made him feel a bit bitter. However, it seemed the sisters had never been dishonest with him. They had liked him from the start, and relying on an outside man due to the lack of male population was the village's reality. And both of them seemed to genuinely like Ethan as a person. After several more nights of deliberation, Ethan frankly conveyed his decision to the sisters. "This might sound really strange, but I've also developed feelings for you both. I'm older, but if having a child with you means saving your family line in the village, I'll try it. However, I might not be able to live here forever. I have things to return to in the States." The sisters, as if expecting this, said, "It would be great if you stayed, but it's okay if you leave. You can decide that later." And so, an agreement was reached. There was a small ritual in this village for an outside man to have children with the women. It wasn't a marriage, but a community-approved procedure. Sonia explained, her face flushing. The ritual is simple. We light a small bonfire. An elder gives a blessing. And that's it. After that, we can live in one house and interact to conceive a child. Natasha beamed. If we both get pregnant, that would be an even bigger blessing. The idea of having children with two women simultaneously was foreign to Ethan. But having made his decision, he had no reason to refuse. The sisters reassured him, there won't be any fighting or jealousy between us. We've always gotten along well. Ethan decided to trust their culture and go along with it. A few days later, a bonfire was lit in the village center. About 20 residents sat in a circle. The sisters wore traditional long dresses adorned with flower decorations, and Ethan wore a borrowed Russian-style fur coat. The village elder performed a short ritual, mixing Russian and the tribal language, and the sisters and Ethan exchanged cups of what seemed to be an alcoholic drink. People clapped and smiled in celebration. Words were spoken, implying, now this outsider will become a member of our village and give us children. After the ritual, people soon dispersed, and the sisters took Ethan's hand and headed home. Both looked shy but also full of anticipation. Ethan's heart was racing, a man living with two sisters, trying to have children. It felt unreal. But from that night, their new communal life began. The sisters and Ethan lived under one roof, sometimes respecting personal space, sometimes sharing meals together. Some nights he spent time with Natasha, other nights with Sonia. He had worried about jealousy or conflict between the sisters. But things proceeded peacefully, with them managing their interactions. Their purpose was clear, and in a village with a shortage of men, such a polyamorous relationship, though rare, wasn't entirely unheard of. After about a month of living together, the three of them settled into a fairly natural daily routine. In the morning, Natasha or Sonia would prepare a simple meal. Ethan would fetch water or chop firewood. During the day they would each help with village chores. And at night, the three would sit together, chat, drink tea, and share intimate moments. The sisters took turns engaging in affectionate acts with Ethan, trying to increase the chances of pregnancy. In this village, the perspective that a child must be born was so natural that village women would occasionally ask if there was any news. The sisters would smile and reply they were still waiting. Ethan felt a bit pressured, but the sisters would comfort him. Don't stress too much. It'll happen slowly. Indeed, he believed that with them being women in their 20s, it was statistically quite possible. Ethan thought his virility might not be what it used to be due to his age. But the sisters' warmth and affection more than compensated. Naturally, their relationship deepened, even in the cold air of the Siberian wilderness. A fervent warmth circulated within their home. Meanwhile, the question always lingered in Ethan's mind, if a child is really born, what will I do? Will I stay here forever? Or will I return? The sisters were also curious about this, but, for now, pregnancy was the top priority. So they postponed the discussion. The village elders also said it was a matter to be decided later. Having a child was the immediate priority. One day, while climbing a hill to gather firewood, Ethan slipped and had an accident. The ground was frozen, and though it wasn't a cliff, he nearly fell into a fairly deep ravine. Fortunately, he caught onto a tree and avoided serious injury. But his ribs ached, and his knee was injured, making it difficult to walk. While he was suffering alone, a young man from the village found him and helped him back. The sisters, pale and tearful, fretted. Are you okay? Are you badly hurt? Ethan reassured them. Don't worry, I don't think any bones are broken. An old woman from the village briefly examined him and said it was a severe bruise, and he'd need to rest in bed for a few days. The sisters took turns applying compresses and making warm soup. Through this, Ethan was once again moved by the sisters' devoted care. Living in such a remote place, what if I suddenly got hurt? He'd thought. But here are two people taking care of me. The sisters said, you're so important to us. Of course. We have to take care of you. Sonia, in particular, calmly took charge of his nursing, while Natasha lightened the mood with jokes. Thanks to them, Ethan recovered quickly. After this incident, Ethan came to rely on the sisters even more deeply. At the same time, the sisters tearfully said, "We were so scared of losing you. We almost had a disaster before any baby even arrived." This experience brought the three of them even closer. Not long after he had recovered somewhat and returned to his daily routine, Sonia first began to feel unusual symptoms. She felt nauseous every morning, and her appetite changed. The sisters jokingly said, "Are you pregnant?" But it was too significant to laugh off. After a few more days, her period was late, and following the village tradition, an old woman felt her belly and said, "She's probably pregnant." When this news spread, the village buzzed with excitement. "A baby is really coming." They cheered. Sonia, calmly, said, "It's thanks to Ethan," and gently cradled her belly. Ethan was stunned with joy. Then dazed again. "I can really be a father. I lived over 40 years without marrying, and I'm having a child this way." Sonia quietly took Ethan's hand and whispered, "Thank you, and I love you," making his heart swell. Just a week later, Natasha showed similar symptoms. "No way, both of us at the same time," she laughed. But this time too, the old woman diagnosed a high probability of pregnancy. Once again, the village was in an uproar. Excitement spread. Both sisters are pregnant at the same time. Such an event, though rare, had apparently happened before in this village. One man fathering children with multiple women was a natural custom when men were so scarce. Ethan felt a double dose of shock and joy. He had assumed he might not be able to have children after his mid-40s. But the power of nature was incredible. The sisters hugged each other and laughed brightly. Oh my, we're both pregnant. This reality was highly unconventional. But the village accepted it as a blessing. For a village declining due to an aging population, 2 new lives suddenly appearing was a miracle. That night, Ethan and the sisters talked joyfully over tea instead of alcohol. Natasha said, "Now I have a worry. What if you leave? We have to raise the children." Sonia added, "If possible, we want you to stay. At least until the children grow up a bit." Ethan had already made up his mind. "For now, I have no reason to leave. I'll stay here at least until after the birth and until the babies are stable," he replied. The sisters cheered. As the sisters entered mid-pregnancy, changes became more apparent. Their bellies grew, they experienced morning sickness, and their bodies felt heavy, forcing them to reduce their work significantly. Despite this, there were no special medical facilities in the village, so basic healthcare had to be self-managed. An old woman helped with herbs and folk remedies. Ethan suggested, "Should we go to the city for a hospital visit?" But the sisters said the journey was rough and the cost was a burden. Both casually said, "Everyone in the village has given birth this way for ages. It's fine." Feeling a sense of responsibility, Ethan did his best to care for the sisters whenever they seemed to struggle. He gave massages and tried to prepare nutritious meals. Though it was hard to get Russian food ingredients, he tried to make even simple dishes nutritious. The villagers helped, but he couldn't expect much. Ultimately, Ethan and the sisters were the main support for each other. The village was happy, saying, "When the babies are born, we'll hear the sound of crying babies for the first time in a long while." Some middle-aged women expressed hope. "We've been struggling more and more, but now the village will find new vitality." The sisters, beside Ethan, caressed their bellies and said, "We must pray to God for our babies to be born safely." As they approached late pregnancy, the village decided to hold a traditional religious blessing ceremony. Apparently, there was a custom for the community to bless the couple again just before childbirth when an outside man and local women were expecting. A bonfire was lit in the yard. An elder-like figure chanted something, and the expectant mothers and the father-to-be each took a sip of alcohol or tea. This was believed to ensure a safe birth and the continuation of the family line. That evening, the whole village gathered. Sonia, Natasha, and Ethan stood before the fire. The wind was cold, but the firelight flickered, and people watched quietly. The elder offered a short prayer, mixing Siberian rural dialects and Russian. The sisters held their bellies, closed their eyes, and prayed, while Ethan stood beside them, participating seriously. People around them clapped and cheered. May it all go well. After the ceremony, a simple village feast was held, since there was a shortage of clothes or blankets for the babies. Everyone said they would gather old clothes and fabric to make some. Ethan was moved. These people are so cooperative. The sisters, teary-eyed, said, "We're so happy everyone is waiting for our babies." The sisters' bellies grew very large, making even walking uncomfortable. The Siberian winter arrived, and the weather was about to turn extremely cold. Labor would soon begin, and they would have to give birth in the village. Going to a hospital was impossible due to blocked roads or lack of funds. So traditional childbirth was the only option. Ethan was anxious. Will it be okay? What if there's an accident? The sisters reassured him. Everyone was born this way. Don't worry, the old woman is very experienced. But an unknown fear crept into him. For someone born in a major American city like Chicago and accustomed to modern hospital systems, the idea of giving birth here without a doctor was an immense burden. But there was no turning back. The sisters pleaded with him to protect them and the babies. And Ethan promised, "All right, I'll do everything I can." If something went wrong and even one of them was endangered, he would blame himself for the rest of his life. However, the sisters, surprisingly, said with a smile, "Don't be too scared, we're ready to. We can only entrust it to God." Eventually, Sonia went into labor first. In the middle of the night, she started moaning from abdominal pain, and the old woman and other middle-aged women rushed over to help. They prepared hot water, cloths, and herbs in the house, while Ethan waited anxiously outside the door. Every time Sonia screamed or moaned, Ethan's heart lurched. After several hours, as things dragged on, the old woman shouted, "Just a little more effort. The head is coming out." Sonia screamed in extreme pain. Her sister Natasha held her hand, encouraging her, "Hold on, our baby is coming." The villagers also waited with bated breath. And finally, around dawn, the clear cry of a baby filled the air. Ethan, listening from outside in the yard, sank to his knees, overwhelmed. The old woman shouted, "Mother and baby are both fine." People cheered, and Ethan, trembling, walked into the hut. Sonia was exhausted but holding the baby, a tiny, red-faced newborn. "My child." Ethan swallowed hard and reached out his hand. Sonia smiled faintly. "It's thanks to you. I'm so glad," she said. Tears welled up. He, who had lived unmarried for over 40 years, had become a father here in the Siberian wilderness. That joy was short-lived, as about 5 days later, Natasha went through a similar process. This time, labor came relatively quickly, and though the pain was still intense, the delivery time was a bit shorter. After the second birth, which lasted for a couple of days, a baby's cry once again echoed. The entire village was ecstatic. Wow, 2 babies almost at the same time. People were in a festive mood, sharing bread or meat and congratulating each other. Ethan was dazed. "I've really become the father of 2 children at once." The sisters, too, had endured immense pain, but the moment they safely held their babies, they smiled as if they had the whole world. Natasha, holding her baby, sniffled, "So beautiful, so tiny." Ethan was again overcome with emotion as he gazed at the child. With the birth of 2 babies, the village changed significantly. The sound of a newborn's cry echoed from a house for the first time in ages. People frequently visited to offer blessings and help the sisters and the babies. Ethan lost track of time, engrossed in childcare, crying day and night, needing to be fed and soothed. The inconvenience of using cloth diapers as disposable ones weren't available. With the sisters recovering from childbirth, a lot of help was needed. Still, with 2 of them, they could take turns caring for the babies. And with Ethan assisting, it was manageable. The most impressive thing was that the sisters showed no jealousy or possessiveness. From a typical American perspective, 2 sisters living with 1 man would seem like a recipe for unimaginable conflict. But here, the prevailing mindset was, we just need to rely on each other and live. Increasing the number of children and continuing the family line is the top priority. In fact, with both of them becoming mothers at the same time, sharing work and childcare seemed to increase efficiency. Ethan often reflected, will I put down roots here? Or will I leave after the children grow up? The sisters and the villagers wanted him to stay. But Ethan himself wasn't entirely without ties to America. His parents and siblings were in America, and there were administrative issues like property and passport matters. But there was no need to decide immediately. With the babies just born, their upbringing was the priority. The sisters would sometimes ask, will our children ever get to visit your country? Ethan would reply, someday it might be possible. Cultural differences and administrative procedures are complicated. But if I try, the sisters would say, we're a bit scared of leaving our home village. But we're also curious about the wider world. They thought that as the children grew, a path would naturally emerge. And this thought put the three of them at ease. When the babies were 1 or 2 months old, the phase of crying indiscriminately day and night arrived. The sisters took turns breastfeeding. Ethan would often hold and soothe the babies while the sleeping sister rested. It was tiring, but when those tiny beings smiled or twitched, his heart overflowed. They're so lovely. It's hard, but it's fun. What will they look like when they grow up? They would imagine all sorts of things. The village had already named the babies according to their tradition, and Ethan also gave them American names as nicknames, like Leo and Lily. The sisters found the pronunciation unfamiliar but cute and accepted them. The babies had both unique Russian or Siberian minority names and American names. The little ones, oblivious, just looked at the world with innocent eyes. After another month, the sisters gradually started to go out and resume some activities. But it was hard to be away from the babies. Usually, Ethan would hold a baby while the sisters fed the livestock or did light gardening. Seeing them, it looked like a typical family raising children. But the unique structure of 2 mothers and 1 father made it seem even more harmonious. People around them also welcomed it, saying, the new family fits in well. This is the vitality our village desperately needed. Meanwhile, Ethan's stay had already extended beyond several months. He had initially planned to stay for only a week or 2. But various incidents had turned him into a long-term resident. He prepared for the harsh Siberian winter with the sisters. And Sonia and Natasha gratefully told him, thanks to you, happiness has come to our village. Ethan whispered back, my life has changed thanks to you too. This is roughly the story up until the babies are a few months old. The village still has a small population and lacks external support, making for a harsh environment. But the family Ethan and the 2 sisters created was special. In a village where men were scarce, an outside man and 2 sisters each had a child, bringing the sound of babies' cries to the village after a long time. The people around them cherished this family and cooperated in caring for the babies. How will their future unfold? As the children grow, the sisters and Ethan might leave the village for a city or even immigrate to America. Or they might continue to stay in this village, combining nomadic life with farming. Whatever happens, the 3 of them are already bound by deep affection and ties. And by raising 2 babies together, they have become one family. Regardless of outside perceptions, in the culture and environment of this village, it's not strange at all. Rather, a man caring for 2 sisters and 2 children simultaneously is seen as a precious miracle that saved a community on the brink of disappearing due to a lack of male population. Ethan became a father suddenly at the relatively late age of 40. But his adventurous spirit and sense of responsibility for his family opened a new path for him. The Siberian sky is still majestic, and the wind is cold. Beyond the village hills, vast plains and coniferous forests stretch endlessly, and wild animals hide. But in this small house, the cries and laughter of 2 babies fill it, creating warmth. At night, after putting the babies to sleep, the sisters quietly chat with Ethan, dreaming of the future, the hope that someday they can take the children to see the wider world. This story pauses here for now, but in reality, everything is ongoing. The children might grow up and go to a city for education. Or the sisters and Ethan might temporarily visit America. Or they might settle here and have more children. The specific choices will be made by them. What is clear, however, is that this unique family formed in this remote village has become incredibly meaningful to each other. To an outsider, It's utterly unconventional. An American man living with two white Siberian sisters from a minority group, fathering a child with each. But in this village, it was necessary, and genuine affection and cooperation blossomed among them. Ultimately, love that transcends culture and borders can arise anywhere. And through children, that love has become richer. Thanks to you, our village has revived, an old villager said to Ethan with a smile. Ethan, embarrassed, replied, I'm also happy to have a family. Beside him, the sisters took turns holding and rocking the babies. Under the peaceful Siberian winter sun, the three of them and the two babies were a family sharing the same light and air. The distance between America and Russia, Siberia and New York, seemed trivial. Before that, love, borders, age, and culture didn't matter much. Perhaps if Ethan later contacts people back in the States, they won't believe it. You got married to two women in the Siberian wilderness and had children. No way, they might doubt, but life walks unpredictable paths. And for Ethan, this life in the Siberian village with the two sisters became the most precious jewel. They are now a family, and this remote village also watches over them with pride. The grand wilderness, the silent forests, the seemingly insignificant but deeply warm villages, and the two women and the two newborn babies. That is the Siberia Ethan discovered, and the turning point in his life he found there. Whatever decisions they make in the future, having experienced a love and responsibility they never imagined, their lives have undoubtedly become richer. Wasn't this family, blooming like a flower even in harsh nature, the true fruit of his adventure?